Hi everyone. Hey, I just wanted to let you guys know what's been happening for this last week and what's happening this coming week. As you know, about a week ago my mother passed away, and so this past week we've been putting together everything for her wake and her funeral. And her funeral and wake actually occurs this Wednesday and Thursday. So I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, who, by the way, has been helping us quite a bit in putting this funeral and wake together. So I'd like to say thank you to her for that. She helped us getting the flowers together, and she's helped us put together things with the cemetery and the like. And so anyway, she indicated to me that I needed to go down to the cemetery to sign some papers. So I'm actually in the car heading towards that way. My mother is actually going to be buried at the Mount Auburn cemetery in Stickney, Illinois. So it's quite a bit of distance from us. But I'll give you some updates on why they're so far out there, and you'll find a lot of Chinese are actually out there as well. Well, back in the day, the Chinese were actually not allowed to be buried in many of the cemeteries here in the Chicago area. Might take you a little bit by surprise to hear that, but Chinese have various traditions that they do. We don't quite follow it. We're Christians ourselves, so we don't follow these Chinese traditions, but the Chinese do tend to have certain traditions where they lay out various types of food on the grave sites for the relatives that have passed on. It's kind of a tradition that they do. It's like offering food to the dead, which quite frankly is not a Christian thing, and this is why our family doesn't follow it. But anyways, they also burn fake paper money. They have these little punks, if you know what punks are. If you're a kid and you've ever had fireworks, you know what a punk is. They burn these little incense things. So they have like a little altar type of thing for that. And so I think cemeteries weren't too happy with that. So many cemeteries would not allow the Chinese to be buried there. And I'm sure there was a certain amount of racial discrimination that occurred as well. So the only cemetery at that time, probably back in the either late 40s, early 50s, that would allow the Chinese to be buried was Mount Auburn Cemetery out in Stickney, Illinois. So what had happened was the Chinese Benevolence Association, which was put together to essentially help Chinese people get buried in Mount Auburn, had bought a whole bunch of land in one section of the cemetery, and this is where most of the older Chinese people are buried today. So they have their own rules and regulations, which, in my opinion, has been very difficult for our generations to deal with. They have a rule that in order to get the grave opened and readied for burial of your loved one, that you need to produce the receipt. Now, the sad part is my mom and dad are now essentially gone. I don't have the receipt, and I'm sure a lot of people are in the same situation where they don't have these receipts. So the next step they have told us is that then you need to have the person who purchased the property, the burial plot, to come by and sign papers. Well, that's not possible. If you're dead and buried already in the cemetery, you're not coming back to sign the papers. So, luckily for me, my sister-in-law was able to convince them to please check their own records, in which case, of course, they found out that our family do have burial plots there. So, my sister-in-law called me today and said, you need to pick up some papers from me and go down to the cemetery and sign some papers for them to allow this all to happen. So that's where I'm headed right now. So just to give you some history of why so many Chinese people are buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery, this is the reason why. Today, things are a little bit differently, done a little bit differently. And so obviously if you're Chinese, you can be buried anywhere you want to be buried at this point. And so the weird part about this all was last Saturday, the day before my mother had passed away, my wife's family had indicated that they wanted to purchase some burial plots at another cemetery. And so my wife said, well, okay, well, I will join you guys and go take a look at where you guys plan to go. So she went and took a look at the cemetery, and turns out that her whole, well, I wouldn't say all of her family, but several of her siblings plan to purchase burial plots at this one cemetery. It's not Mount Auburn. So we had less than 24 hours to make a decision whether we also wanted to purchase burial plots in advance or not, too. So, well, my family has several burial plots available at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Stickney, Illinois. But and the hope of my mom and dad was that we would all be buried together. But realistically speaking, with all the issues we've had with the Chinese Benevolence Association trying to get my mom and dad put together there, and the other headaches that go along with this, I don't really want to be there, quite frankly. So we made the decision to actually purchase plots along with my wife's family at another cemetery. And we did this actually on Sunday of last week, and of course Sunday evening is when my mother had passed away. So a lot of these things had just fallen together like that. It's kind of a weird coincidence, but things happen. So let me tell you too, if you haven't purchased burial plots, you may want to consider doing that in advance, because that does help your family later, because they'll know exactly where to put you when the time comes for your own burial. And definitely keep the receipts, because you don't want to have the same issues that we had with the Chinese Benevolence Association. Keep all those things together. So that's where I'm heading right now, is I'm heading down to the cemetery just to be able to get papers signed so that my mother can be buried on Thursday. So other things, give you some other things. I had said on an email to all of you who are my students that I wasn't planning to put together any YouTube videos for the next 2 weeks, as I was dealing with all these things from my mom. But again, with the help of my sister-in-law and my sister who actually lives out in the California area, and myself, we put together the entire funeral relatively quickly. So we're just basically waiting for the time to come on Wednesday and Thursday to go for the wake and the funeral. But again, still a stressful time period for everybody, of course. But on Saturday, I had 2 classes scheduled. I did our DSLR advanced class at the school, so I taught that class, and that ran from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. But I only had one person sign up for the Photoshop class for that Saturday, so I ended up canceling that class. And I had actually purchased tickets in advance to go to the Expona show, which is the high-end audio show in Schaumburg. And so I had an option to either not go and do nothing at home, essentially, or go to the show. So I opted to go to the show and decided to do some recording and put those things up on YouTube, which I did already, and many of you have already seen that. And so today, as I'm driving towards the cemetery, I'm thinking, well, I've got a good hour or so to drive down there, so I might as well take you guys along and talk to you on the YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching these things. I know it's a bit morbid to talk about all these things, but again, it is a thing that you will have to go through in life, putting together these things for your loved ones and pre-planning in advance for yourself. So let me talk real quickly about this pre-planning business, since we have some time. If you pre-plan in advance, where you know what cemetery you'll go to, you pre-purchase the land, and you could even pre-purchase your memorial markers as well, which we did. Your loved ones don't have to deal with that, and it locks in advance the pricing. So whatever the prices are today for purchasing monuments, for purchasing burial plots, you're paying that price today, and let's say you don't pass away for 30, 40 years from now. Well, you're not paying the price 30, 40 years from now, which of course will be higher. Well, as you can see, I'm no longer on the road, and it kind of abruptly stopped. The camera shut itself down, and so I wasn't able to finish what I wanted to say, and I just wanted to finish it off here. So prepaying for your services at a cemetery, pre-buying your plots, pre-buying your memorial markers, you're paying for those things today at today's prices. And if you don't pass away for 20, 30, 40 years from now, whatever length of time that would be, when the time comes, you've already paid for it, which means you don't have to pay the higher cost that would happen 30, 40, 50 years, whatever length of time it is that it will take before you pass on. So it's a savings of dollars if you do that, and it's an ease of pain that your family will have to deal with when that time comes. So my encouragement to you is to consider doing it. Like I said, it does sound kind of weird to talk about these things in advance, but doing it in advance actually is a good thing. So if you like what you have seen and heard, hit the like button and hit the little bell icon so that you know when new videos happen. And consider subscribing to the channel. That really does help me out, and we'll be talking hopefully nicer and more pleasant things for future videos. But I thought that this is an important subject that everyone would benefit from, so I wanted to share that information with you. Again, feel free to share the video if anybody else you know of could benefit from it. Thank you. We'll see you next time.